Welcome, everybody. Hey, I hope everybody had a good time watching the Super Bowl. I didn't watch it actually, but hope you had a good time doing it. We're going to have a late night conversation. So, yeah, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hope you're all having a great night. This was a late night stream. Figured I would do it. Had a good day today. Went to the gym and exercised. On Sundays, I generally do a big, long mega premiere video like I did this afternoon. I figured I would stream tonight because I have a new PowerPoint presentation to share with you all. And then I'll answer people's super chats. This is the way we normally do things on this channel. I give opening remarks. My opening remarks are followed by a roll call. We find out who's watching, who is on the other side of the camera. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So if there's something you would like me to touch on in the second half of our program, all you need to do is send a super chat or a Rumble rant. That is the way to get your concerns addressed in the second half of the show. First opening remarks, then roll call, then I answer your questions. One quick announcement, which is that we are having a Center for Political Innovation workshop coming up just a couple weeks away, February 22nd. In Minneapolis, and it's going to be great. And the number of people registered is constantly rising. We're doing great stuff. Peter Coffin's going to be there. I'm going to be there. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So I hope you will join us if you are in the Minneapolis area or near there or whatnot. It would be great. It would be absolutely great to see you there. There's going to be good food, music, etc. You'll get to learn all about our project and the important work that we are doing with the Center for Political Innovation. So if you'd like to go, just register and we will get back to you. Go ahead and register. The link is down below. It's in the description. I'm also dropping it on the Rumble chat and on the YouTube chat. Just go ahead and register and we'll follow up with you about attending the workshop. Just the way we always do things on this channel. First, I give my opening remarks. Then from there, I answer your questions. But before I do that, I do the roll call. First, opening remarks, then roll call. We find out who is watching. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something that you would like me to address in the second half of the show, you got a question about something I say, or there's something completely unrelated that you want to talk about, by all means, send me a super chat on YouTube or a Rumble rant. I will answer people's questions in the second half of our show. So first things first, I wanted to start out tonight's program by honoring a very, very important person who just passed away at the age of 95. This is a hero that we don't often hear about in the United States. Sam Nujoma. Sam Nujoma just died yesterday at the age of 95. Sam Nujoma was the first president of Namibia. Namibia is an African country that was colonized by the Germans. And then after World War II, it was seized by the South Africans. It was like a protectorate. It was seized by apartheid South Africa. And Sam Nujoma was an anti-colonial fighter against the apartheid system. And he was a communist and a Marxist-Leninist, and he was trained in the Soviet Union, and he fought for the freedom of his people. And when Namibia became independent in 1990, he was the first president of Namibia. And he was definitely a communist, definitely a friend of the Soviet Union, definitely an admirer of Fidel Castro and Muammar Gaddafi and Mao Zedong and Stalin. He was definitely a communist, and his organization still rules Namibia. Now, they've softened their views a little bit, the Southwest African People's Organization. But yes, the first president of Namibia, a fighter against apartheid, a fighter against colonialism, and a communist. He died yesterday. And I just want to highlight this man who gave huge sacrifices. His father was imprisoned just for being his father, and was, tortured to death in a prison camp. He was a guerrilla fighter for the freedom of his people. He got military training, and he led an army of black people to fight against the apartheid system. And he was a great hero of African people. And people forget that basically all of Southern Africa was under the dominion of colonialism until communist liberation fighters worked to free it, right? That South Africa, Nelson Mandela was on the national committee of the Communist Party of South Africa. He was funded by the Soviet Union. He considered Fidel Castro to be his friend. On top of that, in Angola, you had, the Dos Santos revolutionaries, and the MPLA, and that in Mozambique, it was a communist organization that fought for their liberation, and in Namibia, the Southwest African People's Organization, was also a communist-led organization, and that it was communist forces that overturned apartheid. The U.S. government called people like Sam Nujoma terrorists, and they called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. However, the world now recognizes that the apartheid system in South Africa was abominable, and that these communists were on the right side of history. The Soviet Union and Russia, by giving financial assistance and weapons and other aid to the people of Namibia, to the people of Zimbabwe, to the people of South Africa, to the people of Angola, they were on the right side of history fighting against apartheid and racism and colonialism. And the U.S. imperialists, Wall Street monopolies that were backing the apartheid government, they were on the wrong side. And people just forget that. People think Nelson Mandela was just a liberal activist. They forget that he was funded by the Soviet Union and called a terrorist by the American government. And people don't even know the name of Sam Nujoma, the father of Namibia, the African country of Namibia. So I just wanted to mention that because it kind of sets the stage for what I'm going to talk about tonight. The Center for Political Innovation. We are no longer. I quibbled about how to give the right name to this PowerPoint presentation that I'm doing tonight. And after thinking it over, I called it this: the Innovationist Turn. Why the Center for Political Innovation is no longer seeking to claim a place within communism. Now, that's carefully worded, right? We don't call ourselves communists any longer. We call ourselves innovationists. Because while we hold on to some of the most important points of the communist ideology, we, at this point, have nothing in common with the overwhelming majority of people in America who call themselves communists. We're doing something completely different, and we are building a different movement. And we have to explain what this is. And, there's been a lot of people over the years who said, well, communists should just get a new name. And so some people look at this and they say, okay, you're just giving communism a new name. No, we are not. No, we are not. We are building a different movement. We are not trying to reclaim communism. We are not trying to give a new dressing to communism. We're doing something new and different. The Center for Political Innovation is doing something new and different. And what we are doing is so diametrically opposite of what all the communists in America are doing. all the so-called communists, all the woke people, all the silly communist groups, that we have to call it something different. And we are doing something different. And that's a nuanced thing. No, we're not just rebranding communism and trying to look different. No, this isn't just a rebrand. There is a fundamental difference between what we are doing and what communists are doing. And we have taken the good from communism, and we'll be getting into that in great depth here in this PowerPoint. And then we are going in a new direction. Whereas these folks, they have forgotten the good within communism, and they're going in a very bad direction. So in this PowerPoint presentation, I'll just tell you point by point what it is that we believe, and where our differences lie. Now, this is largely drawn from my book, To the Marxists. And I put out the book To the Marxists to explain that. You can order it on Amazon. It's a small, short little pamphlet I wrote, basically making all these same points. But I'm just going to go over them here in the presentation, just so everyone understands where we stand. So here we go. The innovationist turn. Why the Center for Political Innovation is no longer seeking to claim a place within communism. Where do we stand? What do we believe? Well, number one, we believe the Western imperialist financial system is in severe crisis and must be defeated. This international system centered around Wall Street and London, where big monopolistic corporations dominate the world economy and grind countries into poverty, where countries that break out of that system are beaten down with sanctions and regime change operations and wars. This system where big corporations reap in profits from all over the world, it is leading the Western countries into a disaster. It is bad for the countries under its domination, whether it's, people across the United States that are seeing their living standards go down, whether it's the prison industrial complex where corporations are making profits from locking people in jail, whether it's the opioid addiction epidemic where big pharma companies were pushing doctors to overprescribe opioid medications, whether it's the fact that our bridges and highways are falling apart. There's just so many examples. The power grid collapsing in Texas, the fires raging across Los Angeles when they sent all the fire equipment to Ukraine. There's so many examples of this, that the capitalist imperialist system, the Western financial system, is in severe crisis and it must be defeated. And that is our focus, on opposing the imperialist Western financial system, the global order centered around Wall Street and London. Point number two, central planning works. This idea that you can't have a planned economy, that you just can't do it. Oh no, you just can't do it. It's bull honky. The Soviet Union lifted millions of people out of poverty. They invented space travel. They had the world's largest hydroelectric power plants. They produced more steel than any other country in the world. China today, with its 5-year economic plans and its state-controlled industries, they have had massive economic success, the world's biggest telecommunications manufacturer, great technological breakthroughs. Cuba has the greatest medical school in the world. Nicaragua, with its state-run economy under the leadership of the Sandinistas, has done amazing things in terms of economic development. Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent prior to the overthrow of Gaddafi. They were selling their oil resources. They had a centrally planned economy. And the myth of the 20th century, this idea that central planning, having a planned socialist economy, that doesn't work, that's bull honky, right? And that's just false. And there are many examples all over the world of countries that have broken out of imperialist domination and then used central planning of their economy to raise people up out of poverty, to industrialize, etc. Third, modern technology necessitates moving beyond profits in command, right? What Marx spent his whole career writing about was the understanding that capitalism is constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and having fewer and fewer workers at the assembly line, making the workers at the assembly line easier to replace, reducing the role of human labor in production. And that process of reducing the role of human labor power in production creates economic crisis. The workers cannot buy back what they are producing. In a rational society, self-driving cars would be a great thing. We'd all be happy about self-driving cars. But in capitalism, self-driving cars would lead to millions and millions of people unemployed, hunger, riots in the streets. What sense does that make? Great technological advances should mean more prosperity for all, but instead it means greater poverty. And capitalism is the system we live under, creates a situation where greater abundance of wealth creates greater poverty. The economy melts down every couple years over glut, G-L-U-T, glut, where poverty is created by abundance. People become homeless because there are too many houses. People become hungry because there is too much food. The U.S. government spends billions of dollars buying cheese from dairy farmers and burying it in a cave to keep the price of cheese high. And there's many examples. And the great technological leaps that are happening now because of artificial intelligence and the computer revolution and everything that's happening are creating a situation where this system, where human labor power, is being eliminated, and where the ability of workers to sell their labor power for wages is being decreased. It's making it unsustainable. And all the problems that Marx wrote about, overproduction, the value crisis, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, all of that is back with a vengeance. And this economic system is unsustainable. And we cannot have an economy where profits are in command and the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market reigns supreme. And have modern technology. It's going to lead to just continued economic decay. And number 4, we maintain that Eurasia is rising while the West fails. There's a whole slew of economies around the world, mostly centered around Russia and China, the 2 Eurasian superpowers, that have broken out of the imperialist Western financial system. And they've used central planning to build up their economies, and they have built a new economy. There's the BRICS, there's the Eurasian Economic Union, there's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, there's the Bolivarian Alternative for Latin America, there's the Axis of Resistance in the Middle East, there's the new layer of African governments that have established their independence. There's a whole new economy emerging in the world. And we must embrace this new economy and move toward a multipolar world, and that is the way. We're going to see a new world. This new economy shouldn't be our enemy. We should embrace it because it's not held back by the irrationality of the market. So those are the 4 points that we can pretty solidly agree on. And as you can see, that draws heavily from Marxism. But here we go. And so there's a historical precedent. There's a couple historical similarities, similar moments in history to what we're doing. One, the Bolsheviks opposed social democracy, right? Prior to 1917, all the followers of Karl Marx around the world called themselves social democrats. They were united in the Second International, and they believed in, they believed in Marxism. They built labor unions, etc., and they called themselves social democrats, and the Marxist movement was called social democracy. And this guy in Russia named Vladimir Lenin was a social democrat, was a Marxist, attended gatherings of the Second International, but he started to develop his own ideas. He came up with this concept called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And he saw that capitalism was moving into this stage of monopolistic imperialism, holding back development around the world, the rule of the world by banks and big monopolies. And he said that should be the focus. It should be focusing on fighting imperialism. And that meant that national liberation movements of colonized and oppressed people were good. Marx had said, workers of the world unite. There's no countries, no nations. Well, Lenin said, actually, we want to fight for the national liberation of oppressed people. Furthermore, the Bolsheviks, Lenin's political group in Russia, they developed a new form of organization. Instead of just being a regular political party, they were a vanguard party that was only for people who gave the whole of their lives. The other political parties, the parties of social democracy, anyone, as long as you agreed with certain principles, you could sign up and you could be a member. Well, Lenin said, no, we want a vanguard party. A party only for those who give the whole of their lives. And this party will practice democratic centralism. And democratic centralism was the notion that the whole party marches as one. And after a decision is made, every member is obligated to carry out that decision or leave the party. And that the party engages in what's called agitation propaganda, agitprop, meaning that it stirs up the masses with agitation and it seeks out the best activists and the best organizers among the masses, and it teaches them Marxism. It propagates to them. It propagates to the advance. It agitates the masses. And that the Bolshevik form of political party, a vanguard party only for those who give the whole of their lives, that practices democratic centralism, that agitates and propagates, this was all Lenin's new development. And it's worth noting that the Marxist movement largely thought the Bolsheviks were a weird cult. They considered Bolshevism to be similar to a monastic political order or a religion. They said that it wasn't open and democratic, and that they did not approve of the way the Bolshevik organization was formed. It was very different than the way the social democratic parties were formed. And then all of this culminated in the Marxist parties of Europe, the Social Democrats, becoming more and more reformist, and then ultimately supporting World War I. And they supported World War I, and when World War I broke out, all these parties supported it. And the German Marxists, they signed up and they supported it, and they sent the Germans out to kill the French Marxists, and the Marxists in France supported it, and they sent the French workers out to kill the Germans, and the British Labour Party, they supported it. And it became very, very clear that the social democratic movement was not revolutionary. Not only was it watering down what the movement really stood for, but on top of that, it sent workers out to die in a war. And so when Lenin returned to Russia in 1917, right, there was a big uprising. The Tsar of Russia was brought down, and then there was a provisional government. And so Lenin, who'd been in exile in Switzerland, he returned to Russia with the help of German intelligence, mind you. The Germans gave him a lot of money. And he came back to Russia, and he wrote something called the April Thesis, which was how the Bolsheviks should change their practice and so they could take power. And one of the things that is from the April Thesis, it said, instead of social democracy, whose official leaders throughout the world have betrayed socialism and deserted to the bourgeoisie, we must call ourselves the Communist Party. So they were so different in what they were doing from social democracy that they had to have a new name. What Lenin was doing and what the British Labour Party was doing and what the German Social Democrats were doing was so different that by the time Lenin got to Russia in 1917, he said, we just have to give ourselves a completely new name because we're doing something different. We have different beliefs. We believe capitalism is in its imperialist stage. We have a different kind of organization. We have a vanguard party. And the Social Democrats have become so vile that the masses hate them because they supported the war and they sold out and they supported the war. We just have to make clear to the world we're something different. We have to have a whole new name. And that made sense because there was a fundamental difference. What Lenin was doing was very, very different than what the Social Democrats were doing. And I want to note that essential in what Lenin preached and in the Marxist-Leninist ideology is opposition to imperialism. You always oppose imperialism. That's what it's about. So much so, this is what Stalin said in his lecture about Leninism. He said, the struggle that the Emir of Afghanistan is waging for the independence of Afghanistan is an objectively revolutionary struggle, despite the monarchist views of the Emir and his associates, for it weakens and disintegrates imperialism. So there was this guy in Afghanistan, the Emir of Afghanistan, the king of Afghanistan, who was a conservative, who was a monarchist, not a communist, not a socialist, not a leftist, not a progressive, but he was fighting the British Empire, so that was good enough for them. And then Stalin goes on to say, the struggle that the Egyptian merchants and bourgeois intellectuals are waging for the independence of Egypt is an objectively revolutionary struggle, despite its bourgeois origin and bourgeois title of the Egyptian national movement, and despite the fact that they are opposed to socialism, meaning that these merchants in Egypt, they were fighting the British Empire. And so it didn't matter that they were advocating capitalism, didn't matter that they denounced socialism, they were fighting the British Empire. That a fundamental point of Leninism is that it's about opposing imperialism. Imperialism, this global system of imperialism, is the main enemy, and you stand with anybody who opposes the imperialists. Doesn't matter if they're Egyptian merchants, doesn't matter if they're the emir of Afghanistan, doesn't matter if they're a Buddhist or a nudist or whatever, right? You support anyone who opposes the imperialists. That is a fundamental point that Lenin's entire thesis, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, it's essential. You always stand against imperialism, right? And there's another historical precedence. Christianity broke from Judaism. Now, we're not talking about the Marxist movement here. We're talking about religion. But, when Christianity began, when Jesus Christ was going around starting his mission on the earth, he considered himself to be a Jew, and he considered himself to be the true inheritor of the Hebrew prophets. However, Judaism is really, really focused on, at that time at least, was really, really focused on following the rules. And one of their rules was the Sabbath, that there was a list of things you couldn't do on the Sabbath. Well, Jesus went around healing people on the Sabbath. And when they asked Jesus about why he was healing people on the Sabbath, he said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, saying that this rule that was central to Judaism, that you have to observe the Sabbath, well, the rule was actually, it was there to help people, and people don't have to follow, and basically said you don't have to observe the Sabbath. In addition to that, they, at one point, cornered Jesus, and they asked him which of the 10 commandments was the most important, because in Judaism, they had the 10 commandments that were central. And they asked Jesus which of the 10 commandments was the most important. And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the greatest commandment. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. And all the law and the prophets hang on these commandments. So he basically said, love your neighbor as yourself and love God with all your heart and mind. And that's more important than the 10 commandments. And all the law and the prophets beforehand all rest on that, saying that the essence is you love God and you love your neighbor as yourself. And that's way more important than the 10 commandments. That's big. At one point, Jews don't recruit, right? Judaism is a religion that you're born into, right? In Judaism, you're born into it. It's very much an ethnic, tribal religion. However, Jesus commanded his followers to go and recruit people. He said, all the authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am always with you to the very end of the age. So Judaism doesn't recruit. To become a Jew, you have to ask 3 times. You have to go through they deny you the first 2 times, and you have to go through a whole process. Judaism does not seek to recruit and doesn't proselytize. But Jesus commanded his followers, go and make disciples of all nations. That's a fundamental difference. And at one point, Jesus got into a very heated argument with Jewish leaders. And he said to them, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. And they said, you are not 50 years old yet, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham? He said, very truly, I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. And so basically, even though Jesus considered the Jewish leaders of his time to be complete traitors, and even though he considered himself to be the true inheritor of the Jewish teaching and the prophets, he was preaching something different. He didn't believe in the 10 commandments. He didn't believe in the Sabbath. He believed in proselytizing and recruiting. And after Jesus' death, the Apostle Paul said you didn't have to get circumcised anymore, because to become a Jew, you have to get circumcised. Circumcision is a central thing. And the Apostle Paul said circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from the other people, but from God. So the Apostle Paul said, yeah, we don't even get circumcised anymore. So after a while, it became very clear that, within 100 years of the death of Jesus Christ, the Christians were no longer calling themselves Jews, because what Jews were doing and what they were doing was so fundamentally different that even though the Christians considered Abraham and Moses and Jeremiah and all of them to be from their tradition, they had taken it in such a different direction. They were a totally new religion. And now everyone understands that Christianity and Judaism are two distinct religions. So why are these two things important? Well, first, Lenin considered himself to be the true inheritor of Marxism's revolutionary essence, right? Lenin did not denounce Marx. Lenin did not say he wasn't a Marxist. He considered himself to be the true inheritor of Marx, and he considered the social democratic leaders to be traitors. However, at the same time, he pioneered his own theories and organizational methods. And by 1917, it was clear that Bolshevism was distinctly different than social democracy. So while he held on to what was good in Marxism, he also developed his own new thoughts, and he realized that what they were doing was so fundamentally different, it had to take on and become a new thing. Jesus considered himself to be the true inheritor of the Hebrew prophets, right? He was the true inheritor of Abraham and Moses. He considered the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin to be sellouts and hypocrites. However, his teachings dramatically diverged from Judaism as it was practiced in his day. And in the 100 years following his death, it became clear that Judaism and Christianity were distinctly different movements. At some point, if what you are doing is so fundamentally different than what other people from the same movement or religion or ideology are doing, you just have to acknowledge that it's different. And even if you consider the others to be sellouts, right? Jesus considered the other Jews and the Pharisees to be sellouts. Lenin considered the other Marxists to be sellouts, but he still understood, it got to the point that what he was doing was so fundamentally different, it took on a different name. And that brings us to here we are. We in CPI, we are preserving the revolutionary essence of Marxism-Leninism. There are 4 points in the Marxist-Leninist ideology that no communist organization in America holds on to. And these points are fundamental. And, you know, all the people in America claiming to be Marxist-Leninists, none of them believe in these 4 points. Number 1, Marxism-Leninism is anti-imperialist and says that the Western imperialist system is the main impediment to growth and human progress, and that all anti-imperialists must be supported. That is an essential part of Marxism-Leninism. If you don't support Russia and Ukraine, well, you're not doing what Marxism-Leninism said, because they supported even the Emir of Afghanistan, right? If you don't support the People's Republic of China on Taiwan, you're not doing Marxism-Leninism, because Marxism-Leninism said the Western imperialist system is always the enemy. If you don't support the Islamic Republic of Iran, if you don't support the Venezuelans, if you don't support anybody who's fighting imperialism, anyone who's fighting the Western imperialist system, then you're not doing Marxism-Leninism. That is an essential thing. I just read to you how Stalin said they supported even the Emir of Afghanistan, even the Egyptian merchants. But yet, communist groups in America, almost barely any of them support Russia and Ukraine. They're neutral in Ukraine. They condemn Russia. They protest against Russia. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And they've claimed, well, that Russia is somehow an imperialist country or China is an imperialist country. Well, first of all, that's not true, because that's not the economic definition of imperialism. But even if it was, you would still support them against U.S. imperialism because of revolutionary defeatism. You always welcome the defeat of your own imperialist bourgeoisie. So, the German communists wanted Germany to be defeated in World War I and World War II. The British communists wanted Britain to be defeated in World War I. And they wanted Britain to be defeated by people around the world that were struggling against colonialism. You always want to see imperialism defeated, right? And so even if Russia and China were imperialist, you would still want them to win, because that's called revolutionary defeatism. But yet, very few communists in the United States, like a very, 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 very small number, will actually support the forces around the world that are battling imperialism, even though that is a fundamental point of Marxism-Leninism. You always stand in opposition to imperialism. You always side with the people that are opposing your own imperialist bourgeoisie, None of the communists in America do that. They condemn Russia. They speak with hatred for Russia. They speak with hatred for Iran. They speak with hatred for China. They speak with hatred for Vietnam, for the Houthis. I mean, it's unbelievable. None of them hold on to this fundamental point. Second, Marxism-Leninism believes in economic growth and the increasing of productive forces. The whole point is that capitalism is a system where economic growth is restrained by the irrationality of the market, poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty, right? And that imperialism is when the big multinational corporations keep countries in poverty. And the whole point of socialist planned economy, the whole point of socialism is to have economic growth. And what did the communist governments do when they took power in the Soviet Union? Stalin had 5-year economic plans, and he mobilized the country to lift it up out of poverty. And what did the Chinese Communist Party do? They built up the country and lifted people out of poverty, and they built the second largest economy in the world. Any country that has a socialist revolution, their focus is creating economic growth and eradicating poverty. However, communists in America overwhelmingly believe that growth is bad. They believe that economic growth is somehow bad. And they repeat the idea, it's finite resources, limited planet, and that they think the problem with capitalism is that it creates economic growth. Well, no, actually the problem with capitalism is it holds back economic growth. And in fact, the higher stage of communism, the ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world, is only possible with vast material abundance. And the whole point of having a socialist revolution is to rationally control the means of production so that you can have economic growth. So when the communist movement overwhelmingly doesn't believe in economic growth, and the whole point is economic growth, that's a pretty big difference. But yet, the overwhelming majority of communists in America, or so-called communists, whatever you want to call them, think economic growth is bad. They think capitalism is having money. They think capitalism is having wealth, and they think that's bad. And they think communism is about like just being happy with what you have or having less because money isn't everything. Or it's bizarre. It has nothing to do with what communist governments do. It has nothing to do with what Marx wrote. It has nothing to do with what Lenin wrote. But not only do the overwhelming majority of communists in America not stand with anyone who struggles against imperialism, but secondly, they don't believe in economic growth. Third, Marxism-Leninism has no loyalty to the left of imperialism, right? At some points, it might be important to align with the left of imperialism. At other times, it might be important to align with the right. At other times, you might not align with anyone. During the early 1930s, Stalin organized the communists of the world to focus on opposing social democrats and protesting against the left, right? They said the social democrats were the main enemy. They called them social fascists. And the focus of the communist parties was to oppose leftists, to oppose social democrats. And then, after the rise of fascism, which was considered a right-wing ideology, then the communists aligned with the social democrats and focused on opposing the right wing, the fascists. At some points, you might align with the right. At other points, you might align with the left. Other times, you might align with nobody. But there's nothing magical about the left that says that just because somebody's on the left, you align with them. And Stalin had absolutely no problem mobilizing his followers to target the left. And Stalin also had no problem making friends with right-wing business owners. Henry Ford, who later became a Nazi sympathizer with Hitler. Henry Ford did business in the Soviet Union. Stalin had no problem aligning with Henry Ford. And I believe Stalin even said that that he thought that Bolshevism was I think it was rooted in American efficiency or something like that. And that Stalin brought all kinds of right-wing businessmen to the Soviet Union. The Koch brothers, their father, Fred Koch, he got his start running the oil industry. And so Stalin had no problem making friends with right-wing business owners. And Stalin had no problem mobilizing his forces to oppose the left. And there were also lots of times where he had his followers mobilize them to fight the right and to, align with the left. It just depended on the situation. This idea that there's the left, which is good, and then there's the right, which is bad, has nothing to do with Marxism-Leninism. Absolutely nothing to do with it. But yet, this is what communists in America believe, that there's this big, scary, evil thing called the right wing, that it is our duty to protect imperialism from. And the right wing is always bad, is always the main danger, and the left is always better than the right. And that might be true sometimes, but at other times it might not be true. And that there's no magical loyalty. And in fact, social democracy, Lenin very clearly pointed out, is part of imperialism. It's not the better part of imperialism. It's just part of the imperialist system. World War I could never have happened without the left, the social democrats who supported it. So that's a fundamental point. But the overwhelming majority of communists in America, they believe that we should build the left, that we need to support the left, we need to oppose the right. We have to, and that's not Marxism-Leninism. Fourth, Marxism-Leninism seeks to create a planned economy. Now, this is very basic. This is very, very basic. Read the Communist Manifesto. You know, what is it? The working class seizes control of the government and then operates the means of production according to, it centralizes the instruments of production to raise productive forces, 5-year economic plans. I mean, we want a planned economy. However, the overwhelming majority of communists in America don't want a planned economy. Some of them want more of a welfare state. They just want the government to tax people more and give them free health care. A lot of them think they want independent worker cooperatives that are part of the capitalist market and operate on a market basis. Some of them want to, remove all the white people from North America and redistribute the land to Native Americans. Some of them want to create a government that's focused on feminism and LGBT. They all want something. But very few of them agree on this basic fundamental point of we want a rationally planned economy, right? I mean, it's bad enough they don't believe in economic growth, but there's a number of them that have even told me that wanting a centrally planned economy is fascist. That's Nazi, right? And they want worker cooperatives, and they want to make white people ashamed of their white privilege, and they want to show men not to be sexist and awful, and they want 14 different genders, and they want environmentalism, and they want all kinds of crap. And it's interesting, all the different crap that they've come up with that they want, but none of them, very, very few of them, actually want a planned economy where society controls and plans the means of production. So when these fundamental 4 points can't be agreed upon, when all of the forces in America that call themselves communists can't agree on these 4 fundamental points, how can we say that we're in the same movement? There's not a single communist organization that believes in anti-imperialism. There's not a single communist organization that is in favor of economic growth. There's not a single communist organization that is not loyal to the left. There's not a single communist organization that even wants a centrally planned economy. They all are doing something different. They're all doing something different. And so at this point, with no communist organization in America that stands for these principles, we preserve those 4 points. So we preserve the revolutionary essence of Marxism-Leninism. However, we do stray from Marxism. At the same time that we preserve Marxism's revolutionary essence, we stray from Marxism-Leninism in some pretty key areas. For example, the foundational principle, the foundational philosophy of Marxism-Leninism is dialectical materialism. And I reject dialectical materialism. I believe in God. I believe in the power of the human will and intention. I don't believe that conflict is the way that history always moves forward. A conflict certainly happens, but it's not the only way. And the dialectical materialist philosophy rejects all spirituality, says all that exists is matter, and that matter is constantly changing, and through struggle, contradiction, history moves forward. Well, I think history can move forward with forgiveness, with reconciliation, with common interest, with people working together and having a similar goal, with mentors and mentees, object-subject relationships. I think that there are other ways history can move forward, not only with contradiction and struggle. And I also think that spirituality is very important. I think God exists. And I think that mind over matter, and believing in yourself and expecting good from the world. I believe you get what you expect, and that so the idea that your mind doesn't create reality, your mind just reflects the material world around you, the idea that there is no God, the idea that change only comes through conflict and all of that, I don't accept that philosophically. I think it made sense why Karl Marx believed that, because he emerged in the era in which feudalism was being defeated. And feudalism was a society where they said spirituality was all that mattered. The church ran everything. Everyone's total existence was justified in the name of spirituality. And there was supposed to be no struggle in feudalism. Everyone was just supposed to know their place and accept it. And a lot of people, the peasants, didn't like that. Different people rose up. And so Marx was celebrating the burst of struggle to overthrow feudalism. He was celebrating science and rational thinking, which was the overturning of the strict religious feudalism that was very dogmatic. And so it makes sense that Karl Marx would believe in this dialectical materialist philosophy. It seemed like the ultra-revolutionary view, the ultra break with the old society view, but it was an overcorrection. It was an overcorrection. He replaced the rigidity of feudalism that rejects all struggle and the insane religious dogmatism of feudalism with materialism and the dialectical philosophy. And I think that was a mistake. I do not promote dialectical materialism. And I believe that dialectical materialism is damaging psychologically. If you live your life believing that there is no God, if you live your life believing that all change comes through conflict and struggle, and that I believe that you will burn out. It will destroy you psychologically. You need to learn to forgive. You need to learn to love. You need to learn to find common ground. You need to learn to accept. You need to learn to have give and take action. You need to learn to follow and look up and admire, right? You can't just live a life of struggle, and you need to find God, and you need to wrangle with your own spiritual being and what you're asking of the universe and what you're putting out there. So I just do not accept the dialectical materialist philosophy. Second, we recognize non-Marxist-Leninist socialism. There are a number of governments around the world that are not Marxist-Leninist, but are socialist governments that have broken out of imperialism, that have built a centrally planned economy where the banks and the factories and the major industries are controlled by the state, and the state is overseeing economic growth. There's no fundamental economic difference between Iran's economy and China. In China, they believe in Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought. In Iran, they believe in Shia Islam. But what's the difference? Iran actually has a higher rate of state ownership than China does. In Iran, they have Basij councils that carry out the will of the revolution on a local level. In Iran, they have state-run industries. They have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I mean, there's a different ideology in Iran. In Iran, they're Muslims, and in China, they're communists. But the economic system that they have, which is a government that has come out of an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolution, controlling the economy and planning it out to have economic growth, it's the same system. Gaddafi's Libya, they didn't believe in Marxism, Leninism, but they had a centrally planned economy where housing and healthcare and education was guaranteed to all, and the state planned out the major industries, and they were aligned with the Soviet Union. Ba'athist Arab socialism in Iraq and in Syria, Bolivarian socialism in Venezuela, Nicaragua, all over the world. There are socialist countries where countries have broken out of imperialism and established a centrally planned economy where Marxism, Leninism is not their ideology. However, communist groups, and I guess the communist ideology to some degree or other, insists that only the Marxist-Leninist ideology can create socialism. And this is something that even some of our closest friends hold on to. This belief that Vietnam, because it's a Marxist-Leninist party, is socialist, but Iran is a bourgeois nationalist state. I don't accept that. That Venezuela might eventually become a socialist country, but they're not there yet because they don't believe in Marxism-Leninism. But the Lao People's Republic, well, that's a full socialist society. That doesn't make any sense, right? There's nothing, if we're talking about the economic system, right? There's absolutely no reason that a country cannot have a socialist society unless they say, we believe in Marxism-Leninism. And that is a ridiculous form of dogmatism. And it's worth noting that that is something that the Soviet Union didn't believe. The Soviet Union considered Iraq to be what they called a socialism-oriented government. And they considered Gaddafi's Libya to be what they called a socialism-oriented government, right? The Soviet Union understood that there were other socialist countries that weren't Marxist-Leninist. On top of that, the Marxist-Leninist governments that do exist have become ideologically eclectic. For example, the Chinese Communist Party now claims Confucius as part of its ideological heritage. Bet you didn't know that. But yes, in China, it is commonly taught that Confucius, the founder of Chinese civilization, the advocate of a feudal hierarchy, that he was the founder of communism because he taught his followers about how there would be the last day, which would be a world without inequality and without oppression. And he told his followers about how there would eventually be communism. And they erect statues of Confucius in China. Was Confucius a Marxist? Is his worldview Marxist? No, but the Chinese Communist Party, despite having a Marxist-Leninist foundation, has included Confucianism in their belief. Right? In North Korea, they claim that their ideology, called Juche, which means self-reliance, they say that that is a fundamentally higher stage of Marxism-Leninism. They used to say Juche applied to the Korean Peninsula. That's what they used to teach. They used to teach that Juche was just Marxism-Leninism applied to Korea. Now they no longer say that. Now they say we have developed a new ideology that is uniquely Korean. It's called the Juche ideology that is a fundamental stage above Marxism-Leninism. So, even the Marxist-Leninist governments are not strictly Marxist-Leninist anymore. And if you go to Vietnam, the way they talk, yes, Marxism-Leninism is part of it, but so is traditional Vietnamese culture. So, you go to Cuba today. The communist governments around the world, even the ones that are Marxist-Leninist, have not stuck dogmatically to the ideology and have mixed in their own traditions and other ideological views, etc. The founder of the Russian Communist Party, the leader of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov, is a Russian Orthodox Christian. He's a Marxist-Leninist and a Russian Orthodox Christian. He's mixed Russian Orthodox Christianity in with his ideology. So even the Marxist-Leninist governments are not pure Marxist-Leninists anymore. So the idea that you have to believe in Marxism-Leninism to be a socialist society is absurd. In addition to that, all the Marxist-Leninist governments around the world, except, for the most part, with some exceptions that are really, maybe North Korea might be an exception to this, but even they want to change. They'd like to get more foreign investment. All the Marxist-Leninist governments of the world have a market sector. And it is pretty much understood that in a socialist society, while the industries can be run by the state, while the banks can be run by the state plans the economy, the state provides health care, the state oversees economic growth and all of that. It's understood that you need a market sector for the hotels, for the restaurants, for the clothing, for the children's toys, for consumer goods, for things that make life fun. People have to be able to vote with their dollars, and people have to be able to have a new idea and start a company. And that one of the weaknesses of the Soviet model was this idea that state central planners and state bureaucracy should determine what type of shoes get manufactured and what type of restaurants exist. That's not a good way of doing things. The central planning is good for the commanding heights of the economy, but using the market and letting people vote with their dollars on things that make life enjoyable and fun, consumer goods, that is necessary. The Soviet Union had great economic successes, but it wasn't as good when it came to consumer goods. They were just really behind the West when it came to, soda to drink like Coca-Cola, when it came to etc. And that as long as you have an economy where people spend money and etc., you're going to have a market for the things that make life fun. And that's not contrary to having an overall socialist planned economy. The market is not in command. Profits are not in command. The banks are in the hands of the state. The major natural resources are in the hands of the state. etc. But having the market for fun things, having the market for consumer goods, there's nothing wrong with that. Fourth, we don't practice democratic centralism. Democratic centralism was very effective for the Bolsheviks, and it's been very effective around the developing world when people are fighting a civil war to build a socialist society. But in America, in Western countries, it has been an absolute disaster. Marxism-Leninism says that if you disagree, you either submit and obey what the party decides or you leave. And what that leads to in America is people leave. Right? If you're not in, if you're in a war, you can understand why it's important to have rigid discipline, right? If you and if you're in a situation where you're building an actual movement that's making a revolution, it makes sense to have, people can see the benefit of remaining in an organization. But largely, when right now we're in a period of a strategic defensive, we're in a period where revolutionary movements are, marginal. Democratic centralism creates a situation where if you actually, strongly believe in what you believe, and if you take this seriously, you have to quit. There can only be one smart person in a group. And that's why you look at all the old communist groups. They're all centered around one smart person. There's one or two smart people that are the bosses, and everyone listens to them. Right? And they never get overruled, and no one's allowed to disagree with them, because disagreeing with them, means that you're going against democratic centralism. And you basically, if the party decides to do the opposite of what you want, you have to go along with it, and you don't see a benefit to going along with it. What do you get out of it, right? I mean, you might as well just start your own group. You're going to be just as successful. No one's benefiting from unity, and so you have to just start your own group. And it's been a disaster. And the democratic centralist parties, there's a million little tiny irrelevant democratic centralist parties in America, and none of them have really accomplished very much. And the idea of having a party where people give the whole of their lives, where they must submit and obey democratic centralism, it's an absolute disaster. And in the age of social media, etc., it just doesn't make sense, right? And the final point, we do not claim Comintern lineage. Folks, I don't care if Karl Marx were brought back from the dead and brought back, and then they asked him, would you join CPI? And he said no. I don't give a shit. If Lenin were brought back from the dead and brought to America, and they asked him to join CPI and said no, I wouldn't care. We do not claim to be the true inheritors of the Communist International. And this is not what serious political parties do. All right? Right? I mean, this is what religions do, right? It makes absolutely perfect sense for the Catholic Church to insist that if Jesus were alive today, he would join their church. That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense for the Baptists to say that no, if Jesus were alive today, he would join their church. But a serious political party, a serious political movement doesn't claim lineage. All right? If some group out there that's politically wrong did something right and was effective in the way they organized and pointed to a fundamental truth, we should learn from it, whether or not that fits our lineage, right? And that, I'm not interested in giving people this spiel about how I'm the one true descendant of the Communist International. I'm the one true descendant of Marx and Lenin and all of that. That's just silliness. It's just absolute silliness, right? No serious political movement does that. And if you look around the world, the places that are having anti-colonial revolutions, Hugo Chavez did not claim Comintern lineage, and he created socialism in Venezuela. There are many revolutionary anti-imperialist movements around the world, and none of them are communism TM or communism trademark, right? Communism TM is a dead brand. And if you haven't figured that out, your head is in the sand, right? Communism TM is not going to be taking power in any country anytime soon because it's largely a dead brand, right? It's just, people who claim they are the true inheritors of Marx and Lenin, they're his direct descendants, they're not taking power, right? It's dead. It's stagnant as a movement, okay? Now in China, the Chinese Communist Party that is constantly evolving and new, they're doing great things. In Vietnam, they're doing great things. But I went to Venezuela and I met all kinds of amazing anti-imperialist young people who admire Lenin, who admire Stalin, who, were anti-imperialist, and they were all in the United Socialist Party. And then I went to the offices of the Communist Party of Venezuela, and I found a lot of bitter old people that were mad that the Soviet Union fell, and that's how it is, right? Communism TM, Marxism, Leninism is largely a dead brand. And the people that are still going around saying, well, we're the true inheritors of Karl Marx, I mean, it's almost like adopting an obscure religion, right? It's like, saying that you're a Zoroastrian, right? I mean, it's saying that you're the true Taoist and all the other Taoists have sold out, right? It's not productive. If you want to build a serious movement that can seriously change things in our time, you got to get past the idea to claim that you're the true inheritor. We don't claim common turn lineage. We don't claim that we're the true inheritors of any of this, right? So there we go. So I guess just to conclude, communism has so long been an epithet and an enemy within American society that its aesthetics have become a magnet for deviant individuals. Angry teenagers rebelling against their parents, misfits who hate the society they live in, young men with Oedipal dictator fantasies, etc. None of this is the basis for a genuine revolutionary movement. And let me emphasize that, right? Communist groups in America, because communism is equated with Satan in the American discourse, communist groups in America largely attract people that want to be Satan, people that are at odds with the society they live in, people that are deviant, people that are angry, people that kind of want to be something like what the negative stereotypes about communism are. And that's a big problem, right? That's a really, really big problem. Maybe it wasn't a problem in the 1930s, but after generations, it's a problem, right? That unfortunately, I mean, communism is seen as being against the country you live in, against the society you live in. And because of that, here we go. On top of that, the red flag, the guillotine, the desire to unleash suppressed impulses, this was all the psychology that was used by the bourgeoisie to foment and destroy the feudal order. Communism attached itself to these aesthetics. The imperialists have now found them to be useful in spreading instability across the planet. The aesthetics of rebellion, depression, and vengeance belong to the imperialists at this point. They have become part of the color revolution apparatus. Meanwhile, anti-imperialist states often present a much more conservative message, offering protection from the chaos of the market and presenting the nation as a kind of family where all have a place and are cared for. And that's true, right? Tear it down, burn it down, rebel, red flags, build the barricades. That aesthetic belongs to George Soros right now. Communist and anti-imperialist governments don't talk that way. And the people who do talk that way are pro-imperialist woke people who talk that way. The aesthetic that communism attaches itself to, the red flag, the guillotine, this idea of letting your rage out, this is what communism historically was attached to. But at this point, that is the imperialist aesthetic. Right? That is what the imperialists have mainly utilized to spread the instability that keeps them at the top. And communist governments and anti-imperialist governments no longer embrace those kind of aesthetics. So that's important, right? We want to talk about practice here. Communists abandoned the Uhuru movement. A group of black revolutionary socialists, let me just pull this off for a minute. A group of black revolutionary socialists had their homes raided by the FBI, and they were dragged into federal court and charged under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. They said that their preaching of anti-imperialist ideas, that was acting as a foreign agent, and they almost went to prison for 15 years for being anti-imperialists. And none of the communists in America stood with them. None of them, right? And I was in front of the courthouse with them when they were sentenced. I was in front of the courthouse with them when their trial began. But all the communist groups left them out to dry. Now, if that right there doesn't tell you why communism in America is worthless, I don't know what to say, right? If a group of black activists who are rooted in the Black Panthers, etc., get arrested for preaching anti-imperialism, and they want to throw them in jail as foreign agents, and none of these communist groups support them, that right there tells you something is fucked up. I mean, that right there is huge. And it doesn't even occur to these people to support them. I mean, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. It doesn't even occur to them to support them. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. But, one of these communist groups, I'll just tell you, these communist groups, they're not interested. There's a job that really needs to be done. There's a job that really needs to be done, which is we need to build an anti-imperialist movement to oppose the low-wage police state and the danger of a new world war. No communists in America are doing that or even understand that that is needed or possible, right? I'll tell you, one of these communist groups, right? There's a young woman who came to one of our CPI workshops, and she's very good looking, very articulate and well-spoken. And I said to her, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And she said, I see myself rising up the ranks of my group. And I thought, like, her group doesn't do anything. They have Zoom calls about Stalin. And I said, well, have you considered, I mean, I could see you, being a communist member of Congress. I could see you leading a mass anti-imperialist organization. Maybe you could start your own YouTube channel to preach these ideas. No, she just sees herself leading Zoom calls about Stalin. Like, the idea of building a movement to oppose the low-wage police state, the idea of standing with the Uhuru Three and building a movement to support the Uhuru Three when they're indicted, it doesn't even occur to these people. These people have no idea that you could actually build any kind of revolutionary movement, right? We at CPI are a small organization. And what did we do? Well, when Chairman O'Malley and the Uhuru Three were indicted, what did we do? We went to the federal courthouse. Here, I will show you, video of what we did. Right. I mean, if you want to see what we did, we supported them because we felt it was necessary. And these other groups, it's like it didn't even occur to them that supporting them was something even worth doing. Right. This was me at the federal courthouse. On behalf of the Center for Political Innovation, I would like to just give and express our deep admiration for the three defendants and what they put up with, what they struggled, how they endured. I also want to say that the Foreign Agents Registration Act, an absurd piece of legislation, was the basis of this prosecution. And that piece of legislation needs to be overturned. The Foreign Agents Registration Act is a threat to all Americans who advocate peace. It essentially criminalizes being friendly to other countries, and that piece of legislation needs to be overturned. That law is a threat on all Americans who advocate peace. We were honored as the Center for Political Innovation to raise this case at the United Nations, to raise this case at the World Youth Festival in Russia, and we will continue to raise this case. A full pardon needs to be granted to the Uhuru Three, because Donald Trump saw how that legislation could be weaponized against his own supporters as well. So Donald Trump needs to give a full pardon to the Uhuru Three when he takes office. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I was out in front of the federal courthouse. It never even occurred to these communist groups that have Zoom calls about Stalin that they should support this group. Right? Never occurred to them that, wow, the federal government's trying to make it illegal to be an anti-imperialist. Maybe we should stand with this group that's been indicted. Never even occurred to them, right? They're too worried. Basically, most communist groups in America are busy defending U.S. imperialism from Donald Trump. That's what the overwhelming majority of communist groups in America are doing. Right, is that Donald Trump is a threat to U.S. imperialism because he might make peace with Korea, he might end the war in Ukraine, and he's shutting down the FBI, and he's shutting down USAID and the CIA. And so all the communist groups, for the most part, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, Socialist Alternative, the CPUSA, they are defending U.S. imperialism from Donald Trump. They want to protect the FBI. They want to protect the CIA. They want to, keep the war in Ukraine going. They want to keep, they oppose peace with North Korea. And they see Donald Trump is seen as a threat to U.S. imperialism. And they have signed up and said, let's go build an anti-Trump movement. And they're very open about this. If you look, I get PSL's emails. It's fight Trump, fight Trump, fight Trump. So that's what the bulk of American communists are doing. They're defending U.S. imperialism from Donald Trump. That's what the bulk of the American communist groups are doing. And then there is a small minority, a very small minority, Party of Communists, some more recently formed organizations, Party of Communists, some more recently formed groups. That's about it. And those groups are dicking around. And that's all they're doing. They're just dicking around. I don't know what they're doing. They are building their social media platforms. They're having Zoom calls talking about Stalin and talking about internet gossip about other communist groups. They're, updating their Twitter pages or whatever. They're dicking around on social media, and LARPing, and telling their friends what a great communist they are. And then the rest of them are actively defending U.S. imperialism from Donald Trump. The reason that I continue to talk about other communist groups on here is not because I'm just trying to run other groups down, is because we have to justify our existence as the Center for Group. And it would make sense. Somebody would say, hey, why should we organize? Why are you guys doing this? Why don't you guys just join the CPUSA? Well, here's why. If we joined the CPUSA, we'd be on the wrong side. We'd be supporting imperialism against Donald Trump. We'd be trying to prevent Donald Trump from breaking apart the FBI. We'd be trying to get Kamala Harris elected so the Ukraine war would be going. So if we joined the CPUSA, we'd be on the wrong side. Say, why don't you just join PSL? Well, if we joined PSL, we would be rioting against Donald Trump. We'd be on the wrong side. We'd be actively trying to defend the FBI and defend the CIA. We'd be, organizing riots against Donald Trump. Why don't you just join one of these other groups? Well, let me add, you're allowed to be a member of any other political party to be in CPI. You can be in the Democrats, the Republicans, you can be in the Green Party, you can be in the Communist Party or any party. We have no ban on dual membership. So you're allowed to be in any of the other groups. But CPI exists to get the job done because nobody is doing the work that we do. Again, none of these communist groups thought it was important to stand with the Uhuru Three. None of them thought it was important, right? They're so worried about their Facebook and their Twitter or they're conservative, and they're so, gossipy and sectarian, and they hate the Uhuru Three. None of them thought it was important to be here. Well, we raised lots of money for the Uhuru Three. We did all kinds of solidarity. We raised their case in Russia. We did it. And that's why CPI must exist. It's because if we didn't raise their case at the United Nations and have a press conference about it, if we didn't raise their case at the United Nations, at the World Youth Festival, it wouldn't have been raised. If we hadn't given all the efforts that we did, if John McCarthy hadn't done the important work that he did to support Uhuru, it wouldn't have gotten done. And if we had been in CPUSA, we wouldn't have been allowed to do it. We would have had to go out and petition for Kamala Harris. If we'd been in PSL, we wouldn't have been allowed to do it. If we'd been in one of these other parties that dicks around on the internet and has Zoom calls about Stalin, we wouldn't have been able to do it. But we exist, and that's why we did it. Another thing, right? Donald Trump was running for president on a platform of having peace with North Korea. So what did we do? We went out and we raised support for North Korea during the elections. I'll show you, I'm not going to show you the whole video, but I'll just show you a quick clip of what we did when Donald Trump had his big rally at Madison Square Garden.
So we're here on 34th Street, and the crowds have lined up. They're going in to see Trump speak. We've got our banner. We're handing out our palm cards, spreading the message.
Like a concert, but bigger. I see the lines of people going block after block after block after block.
To Russia, with China, with many countries. Oddly again.
Great moment when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un
and started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we want to see peace not just with North Korea, but with Russia, with China, with many countries around the world. It is outrageous that billions of dollars is being spent on prolonging the war in Ukraine when our people can't get relief in North Carolina. People are left behind in Georgia and North Carolina. They can't get any relief.
Yeah, and if we didn't exist, we wouldn't have been able to do that, right? Right? If we'd been in one of these silly internet clubs, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So, you know, we have to exist because there's a job that needs to be done. We need to build a real anti-imperialist movement. We need to build support for peace on the Korean Peninsula. We need to stand with people that get indicted by the U.S. federal government for being anti-imperialist. And all that the communist groups are doing, the majority of them are busy defending U.S. imperialism from Donald Trump, making sure that somebody the U.S. imperialists don't trust is opposed, and they're aligned with the FBI, and they're aligned with George Soros, they're aligned with CNN and the CIA against Trump. That's the majority of American communists. And there's a small minority that are dicking around on the internet. Well, I'm sorry, we have to exist to get the job done. Right? I mean, if we didn't exist, who would have stood with Uhuru? If we didn't exist, who would have raised peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula throughout the elections? Right? We did it, and we have to do it. Right? We have a job to do, and we do it. And none of these groups even understand why what we do is important. I mean, that's the craziest thing. It's not that they don't do what we do and we're just better than them. They see what we do and they're like, why does that matter? Right? Oh, a group of black revolutionaries got arrested and charged with being foreign agents. Who cares? Right? That's not, what does that have to do with my Facebook likes and shares? Who cares? I heard they're a cult, or they're not supporting Kamala Harris, so they must be not. They don't care. They don't think it's important to stand with the Uhuru Three. It doesn't even occur to them that one should stand with the Uhuru Three. Doesn't even occur to them that we should spread anti-imperialism among Trump's supporters and promote, peace with DPRK. It doesn't even occur to them. When we were in Russia at the World Youth Festival, every morning, we would meet with the other communist group that came with us to the World Youth Festival. And I would listen to these jackasses talk. And I would sit there and they would be like, oh, we're going to be elected to the third committee of the 12th. And they'd be bragging about how they maneuvered and they're going to be on some committee with some other communist group. And we're like, who cares? And they're sitting there. They're just so caught up in like this competition about who can be the king of international communism and who can be the leader of the board of the international committee to put on the festival or this society or that. And I remember Noah and I were just sitting there like, who cares? Who cares? And they were so competitive. Every time we did anything, it was like they were angry because we outdid them somehow. We opened doors for them. They never would have even gotten to the festival if it hadn't been for us. And we got them in, and, we put on a press conference at the United Nations before the festival. And the point was that we were going to the World Youth Festival and we were concerned about Uhuru. I was the only person that raised the Uhuru case in my remarks to the UN. The other two communist groups that were there, they didn't even mention the Uhuru movement in their remarks. They were too busy just going, oh, look at us, we're special, right? And then the whole time we're in Russia, every time I sat with them at dinner, they're just like, oh, we've been elected to the committee and we outdid CPUSA and we made a connection here. We don't care. We're trying to build a real anti-imperialist movement. They're not doing that. They're just dicking around on the internet, right? And somebody's got to do what we're doing, right? And if we didn't do it, there's an urgent need to build a real movement to oppose the danger of a new world war and to oppose the emerging low-wage police state. It's urgent, and we have to do it because none of these groups are going to do it. Our communist rivals and detractors do not notice what we have done, and they do not even understand the importance of the work. They are in a completely different category than us. They do not even aspire to do what we do. We must be clear with our words that we represent something completely different, with different goals, different beliefs, and a different orientation. We are not doing our own version of what the various communist groups are doing. We are doing something completely new, so we can win in a completely new time in new conditions. The low-wage police state and the danger of a new world war have not vanished simply because Trump won the election. The next 4 years will be an uphill battle, full of setbacks, victories, and stalemates. New opportunities now exist for us to push anti-imperialism forward and build the needed anti-monopoly coalition with the aim of breaking America free from imperialism and bringing into being a government of action that fights for working families. To remain communists is to keep fooling around and not doing what we have set out to do. Innovationism is a new stage, and we are ready to swing into action. No looking back. Goodbye, communists. You want us to be your enemy, and at this point, we welcome your hatred. We have far too much important work to do, and we are far too aware of our deep responsibility in these crucial times to keep worrying about you or existing within your paradigm. We must move on to something higher. Long live innovationism, right? And yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, you can be in any party and be in CPI. And we're doing it. We're building the actual movement, and other people are either defending U.S. imperialism for Donald Trump or dicking around on the internet and being assholes and not caring about Uhuru and not spreading anti-imperialism. And so we have to exist. We have to build our own movement, right? And these other people don't even understand that would be an important thing to do, and it doesn't even occur to them. So we just have to just do our own thing. We're a separate entity, right? And the people getting angry about this in the chat, right? If this is making you angry, that's probably because this applies to you, right? I'm sorry, but it's like, we're doing something real. We really did stand outside of Madison Square Garden and engage with thousands of Trump supporters and get mentioned in New Yorker magazine. We really did stand with the Uhuru movement. We really did have one of our members confront Ilhan Omar. I'll put that on, right? No more money for rich men's wars. It was great. That really happened, right? We really did publish a book about the Houthi movement that's going to be distributed in mass. We really do stuff, right? And we're really doing and building a real anti-imperialist movement. And these people on the internet that are just fun to listen to, they're not doing that. They're just building an internet fandom. And they have gone out of their way to be our enemies. And they've been very hostile to us, even though they claim to believe roughly the same thing we believe. And the reason they're very hostile to us is because we're showing them up, because they're not serious. They're con artists. They're scammers, right? They just want you to subscribe to their social media. They want to be internet famous. That's all they want, right? We're building a real movement. And there's a reason that the government boosts them. And there's a reason that we get suppressed. And, the fact that these people didn't even think it was necessary to stand with the Uhuru movement, right? And, that if that doesn't tell you right there, that these people are frauds, right? There was not a single Workers' World Party person in front of the Uhuru, in front of the federal courthouse in Tampa, not a single person from the Communist Party USA, not a single person from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, not a single person from the Party of Communists, not a single person from the ACP. These people who claim that, we're building an anti-imperialist movement, and then a group of black revolutionaries get dragged to jail and almost go to prison for 15 years for doing it, and it doesn't occur to them, like, maybe we ought to do something about it. And they actually attacked CPI for doing something about it and said, that's just being part of the protest cage. They don't care. They're not serious. They're just fooling around. We don't want to be associated with those people. We're doing something fundamentally different, right? Just like Bolshevism was fundamentally different than social democracy, just like Christianity was fundamentally different than Judaism, we are doing something completely different than what the communists are doing. And I don't want anyone to think I'm a communist. I don't, because I'm not. I'm not a communist, right? I'm an innovationist. Communists hate the Uhuru 3. Communists are trying to defend U.S. imperialism and the FBI and the CIA from Donald Trump. Communists don't believe in economic growth and believe in degrowth. Communists don't stand with Russia, right? And innovationists do. And that's just when it gets down to it. And, go and roll back and watch the last hour of this program if you want to, hear what else I've said, because I see people in the chat, saying things that I've said before. But we are in a new paradigm where communists are the enemy. Communists are basically the enemy in America at this point, right? U.S. imperialism thinks Donald Trump is a threat because he wants to make peace on the Korean Peninsula, because he wants to possibly make peace in Ukraine, because he's breaking apart the FBI and he's breaking apart the CIA. Communists are working with U.S. imperialism against Donald Trump. So are they on the right side? Do you want people to think you're a communist and support the FBI and support U.S. imperialism? Right? I can go down the line. Communists are on the wrong side. They're on the wrong side. There's just no way around it. They're either on the wrong side or they're dicking around on the internet, right? One or the other. They're either on the wrong side or they're dicking around on the internet. The masses of people in America want economic growth. They want more higher wages, better schools, jobs. The communists go around saying growth is bad. And the problem with capitalism is that it's creating economic growth. They're on the wrong side. The American people are tired of their rights being taken away and the FBI suppressing them. Well, communists are defending the FBI and saying, oh, Donald Trump is bad. We got to drive out Trump. They're on the same side as the FBI, right? And so it's like, at this point, I don't want to be a communist because communists are on the wrong side. I support People's Korea, and I want Donald Trump to go back to North Korea and shake Kim Jong-un's hand. Communists don't. I support ending the war in Ukraine, and I want my taxpayer dollars to stop going to Ukraine, and I want this war to end. Communists don't. Communists think Russia's an imperialist, a fascist, racist country. Putin's a Nazi, and they support Ukraine, right? I could go down the line. Communists are on the wrong side. I don't want the masses of people to think I'm a communist because the communists didn't stand with the Uhuru Three. The communists don't oppose imperialism. The communists don't defend the American people from the low-wage police state. So we can't be communists anymore. We're doing something new, right? We take the good and we leave the bad, right? American communists take the bad and they leave the good. And that's really what it comes down to. You said it perfectly, Gavin. That's the situation we're in, right? And so this is why we need to just understand we're building a new movement, and that what we're doing is fundamentally different. So, yeah. Now I had a couple other things I wanted to comment on before, and I don't see, and no one's sending any super chats. So if you have any questions you want me to answer in the second half of the show, you ought to send them in now. You ought to send them in now. Yeah. I'll just say this. What if, hypothetically speaking, we forced CPUSA and PSL and Socialist Alternative and all of them to say, you know what? You, CPI, you're the real communists and we're phonies. You guys are right. What if we won the argument? And they said, you know what? You guys are the real communists and we're phonies. What would that accomplish? Nothing. Why are we having an argument about who's the real communists? What is to be gained? So all the fake communist groups, they all would admit we won the argument, which this will never happen. But even if it could happen, what would be the point? What would we gain from having them go, you know what? You guys are the real communists. We're phony. Nothing would change, right? I'm done having the argument. I don't want a place in American communism. I want to build the anti-imperialist movement my country needs. I want to save humanity from the danger of a new world war. I want to defeat imperialism. I am not interested in arguing with a collection of doofuses who couldn't even get their asses to Florida to support the Uhuru movement. I am not interested in arguing with them about who's the real communist. It's a waste of my time. It is not productive. And even if I won the argument, I would gain nothing. These are serious times. We have got to save our country from the danger of a new world war. and the low-wage police state. And if we spend our time trying to win the argument and be the real communists, it's not worth it. It's just not helpful. And there are some things about communism that are wrong, like dialectical materialism, like, like the aesthetic of rebellion. There are spiritual problems with communism as a movement, and the global communist movement, as I said, has largely gone away from classical ML. So at this point, we need to build the movement this country needs and fight for a government of action. We need a government of action that fights for working families, and we need to defeat imperialism. We need to oppose the danger of a new world war. We need to stand against the emerging low-wage police state. And if you want to call yourself the real communist or whatever, that's your business. We're not interested in having that argument anymore. We've got way too much work to do. That's the point. Now, there's another issue that I did want to comment on, which is this issue. So this is just kind of a passing comment. Oh, I guess I'll just say this. If you're interested in everything I just said, it's in a book form. I wrote a book saying this, right? And that PowerPoint was largely drawn from a book that I wrote. So, To the Marxists, it's available on Amazon. You can read a whole book on this point, but I wanted to raise this point. So Donald Trump has appointed as his spiritual advisor a pastor from Florida named Paula White. And Paula White, she's a longtime pastor. And so she's widely hated. There's a couple clips of her going around, and they use these clips to make fun of her. And if you watch the clips, she's not doing anything wrong, right? It's just like, this woman preaches for a living. She gives sermons that are many hours long. And it's like one of them, she says basically all the evil that is being born, she doesn't want the evil that is being born to come into being. She wants any evil that is about to be born to be aborted. Well, she's not calling for aborting any actual babies or anything. She's just saying if there's evil that's about to be birthed into the world, abort it. What's wrong with that? And then this other clip they make fun of her with, she's, being spiritual, and she's getting her crowd fired up. And she's saying, I want angels from South America and I want angels from Africa to come to the United States and make life better. What's wrong with that? Right? What is wrong with that? And they just make fun of her. She's got a Southern accent. And she's a Pentecostal, right? She does the speaking in tongues and stuff like that. And they just make fun of her for saying that. Nothing's wrong with saying you want evil that is about to be born to not be born and be aborted. You're not calling for any people. You're saying the evil that could be born should be aborted. Nothing wrong with that. And then calling for angels from South Africa or South America to come to the United States. Why wouldn't a pastor call for that, right? That doesn't make nothing wrong with that. But anyway, so I watched a couple long hit pieces about her today. All right. I was walking around. I had to go to Manhattan and pick up some stuff. And so I just listened to two really long bread tubes, hit pieces on Paula White. I listened to the pieces and I'm just like, so what? So what? Right. She's been married a few times. That's not my business. Her personal life, whatever, she's divorced, married. Who cares? Right? That's her business. That's between her and people who join her church, I guess. Right? If they feel she's being a hypocrite or whatever, I don't care. Not my business. Right? Right? What's wrong with that? Her message is very much a message of prosperity gospel, expect good from the world, that kind of thing. Okay. Well, Donald Trump, it makes sense that Donald Trump would believe in that. Because Donald Trump, he grew up in the church of Norman Vincent Peale, who was a very important self-help minister here in Manhattan. And Donald Trump grew up with that kind of preaching, prosperity gospel and stuff. That's Donald Trump's background. So is it a surprise? I'm not seeing what's so bad about Paula White. I really am not. She's a female pastor, Pentecostal, prosperity gospel pastor from Florida. And it's just what I noticed, though, about Paula White, though, is that she grew up in a trailer. She grew up in a trailer. She's a poor person, a poor white person. And she had a very difficult upbringing, domestic violence, some bad things. She had a really difficult upbringing, and she discovered that she was a good orator and preacher and became very religious at the age of 18. Good for her. And what I noticed as I was listening to these different hit pieces on Paula White is that this is what they hate, right? Liberals are fine with the Rockefellers being rich because they just are. And they're fine with the DuPonts and the Carnegies and the Rothschilds being rich because they just are. But if a working class person gets really passionate about something, and builds an organization and goes out and creates something, they're a narcissist. They're power hungry. They've got to be stopped. They're ruthless. It's ridiculous, right? And they hate self-made men. I'm serious. They hate self-made women. It's like the rich people can just be rich, and that's fine, right? Because they are. And we talk about maybe, that's unfair. But we don't really mind that. But they always target these self-made, hardworking people, and it's like they're ruthless. They're power hungry. They've got to be stopped. What? It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, right? They're supposed to be for the underdog. They're supposed to be for the downtrodden, but they're not. They're for the people that are just kind of de facto in power. And they see the people that are rising up. They see Paula White, a working class person who built her own ministry and became a pastor. And they see her as, as this fundamentally awful thing. And I've noticed that it's always the self-made men that they hate. It's always people who work really hard and are passionate. It's like this weird, like pessimistic jealousy that they have. Like, it's like they hate people who work hard and pull themselves up. It's very, very odd. But anyway, I wanted to share with you all. So as I was researching Paula White, and I was listening to the hit pieces on her, and it's like, whatever. I don't care about her personal life. She was married, she was divorced, whatever. Not my business, right? Again, her religious beliefs are not mine. I'm not a Pentecostal, but whatever. That's not my business, right? I came across actually something really awesome about Paula White. Folks, I can't believe this. Of course they hate Paula White. Of course they hate Paula White. I never would have guessed this in a million years. Honestly, I did not see this coming. Folks, Paula White supports North Korea. Paula White supports North Korea. I am not making this up. She spoke at a rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula in 2021 in South Korea. That is her on a stage in South Korea, speaking at a rally. And I will quote to you what she said at the rally. These were her words at the rally. And the rally was called by Holy Mother Han, Hak Ja-han Moon, right, from the Unification Church, who is one of the biggest supporters of North Korea. And at the rally, she said, quote, "I am honored to participate in this historic interfaith prayer rally for the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. I want to take a moment to honor as well and encourage Mother Moon for her great work as a spiritual leader who loves the Lord and seeks to carry out and comfort the heart of God in all the areas of conflict in the world. She is truly a jewel from God." She called a pro-North Korean activist a jewel from God. This is Paula White. This is Paula White standing next to Mother Moon, right? There she is. There is Paula White standing next to Mother Moon, right? Hak Ja-han Moon, Holy Mother Han. And this is Mother Moon with Kim Il-sung. And so Mother Moon, the woman you see there standing right next to Kim Il-sung, right, had a rally in South Korea for the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And Paula White from Florida went all the way to South Korea and spoke at it. And there she is with Mother Moon. Now, is that not awesome? That is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. That is really, really badass. That is very, very cool. I cannot think at this point, I don't know. Maybe it was a few other pastors I know, but I think the fact that that Donald Trump has a personal spiritual advisor who supports North Korea. That is awesome. So no wonder they hate her. And no wonder they want you to think she's ruthless and power hungry and all of that. I mean, this is wild. That's Paula White with Mother Moon. And let me show you again. This is Mother Moon with Kim Il-sung. I'm just telling you, this is awesome. This is absolutely awesome. She is awesome. My respect points for Paula, as I was listening to the hit pieces on Paula White, I was blown away. And then when I found this out, that Paula White is an admirer of Holy Mother Han, Hak Jahan Moon, I was blown away. Paula White supports North Korea, folks. Paula White supports North Korea. So the fact that Donald Trump has an advisor who supports North Korea is absolutely awesome. So, the hate for Paula White that I'm hearing, it makes me understand why. So yeah, there you go. So that's what I wanted to say tonight, folks. Now, I don't see any Rumble rants or super chats. But usually in the second half of the show, I answer people's questions. So if you got any questions for me, now would be the time to send some super chats and all that. Why don't we do the roll call? I'll put some music on, and then I'll answer any questions that people have. And if not, then I'm going to bed because it's almost 1 a.m. here. So names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us tonight? We got Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Welcome, Mark. Names and locations. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome. Brooklyn in the house. Phil, good to see you. Right? Is the kimchi better in North Korea? Don't know. Never been there. Auckland, New Zealand. Kiwi Corner. Bob Troy, New York. Welcome. Jenny in Cincinnati. There we go. Names and locations. Ishmael in Los Angeles. Ed in Louisville. Artyom in Krasnoyarsk, Russia. Ian in the Yukon, right? Chicago, out of the movement to the masses. That's right. Penny in Minnesota, doing hard work. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Rod from Knoxville, Tennessee. Welcome, Rod. Good to have you, Rod. We got a good crew of folks here. This is good. Hillary in Wales. I just got here. Galesburg, Gavin. Welcome, Gavin. Names and locations. Julius Malema and EFF. Alex in Brazil. Welcome. All right. Moody from London. Welcome, Moody. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else? St. David's, Bermuda. All right. Okay. So if anyone else has any more super chats or Rumble rants, send them in. I've got one Rumble rant, and then I've got one super chat. So if you got any more, send them in. I usually put some music on as an opportunity, for people to do that. What song should I put on tonight? What song should I put on for you all tonight to pass the time, right? What song? Okay. This is a traditional English folk song of English soldiers. It's called Over the Hills and Far Away. So yeah, I've always liked this song. It's about duty, and it's kind of peaceful, and it's about, soldiers traveling around the world. So send me more questions for the second half of the show, super chats, Rumble rants, and then I'll answer them, and then I'll be done. So there we go.
Scoundrel has the shoes, but now he's free to sing and play. we'll return all jar away, and it's all the hills and all the main. Portugal and Spain, dance and we obey, all the hills and far away. That falling lads behind the drum, with colours blazing like the sun, and stand together come what may, all the hills and far away, and it's all the hills and all the main. To Flanders, Portugal and Spain, the King commands and we obey, all the hills and far away. If I should fall to rise no more, as many comrades have before, the drum shall beat and the pipe shall play, all the hills are far away, and it's all the hills and all the main. To Flanders, Portugal and Spain we obey, all the hills are far away, and it's all the hills. Flanders, Portugal and Spain, the King commands and we obey, all the hills are far away.
All right, everybody. So, all right, do we have any more super chats or Rumble rants? I know it's late. All right, so the Rumble rant that came in was from Penny. She said, the Mexican Constitution now guarantees free made-in-Mexico fertilizer for small and medium farmers because Mexico owns Pemex Oil Company. Well, that's good. At one point, they privatized Mexico's oil under the previous administration before AMLO got in. There was rioting and such. And, I have a positive view of Claudia Sheinbaum. I think she's a pretty decent president. She's been calling out Trump. She recently raised the issue of military-grade weapons from the United States ending up in the hands of the drug cartels. And she made a deal with Trump. Trump was trying to put a tariff on Mexico, and then they made a deal that she was going to, help border security with the Mexican army. And I like AMLO, the previous president. I thought he was a good president for Mexico. Again, doing the best he could in kind of an awkward situation. And I like what she's doing, right? And, that's what she's doing there is kind of similar to what Trump's doing with the tariffs, right? She's saying Mexican-made fertilizer gets priority, right? That's what a tariff is. That's where you tax items that are imported to your country and you give priority to domestic corporations. That's what that is. So, that said, I think what she's doing is smart, right? And she's protecting their domestic manufacturers. Russia makes a lot of fertilizer. And that's one thing that as a result of the war in Ukraine, they put all kinds of sanctions on Russia, and Russia wasn't able to send fertilizer to a lot of African countries. And that caused a lot of problems at the beginning of the Ukraine war. Russia sends fertilizer to many African countries for free of cost, just so they can grow and develop their farming sector, which I think is very cool. So there we go. So I think that's great. And there we go. I know Brazil is basically still buying Russian fertilizer, not complying with the sanctions. So there we go. So thoughts on Julius Malema and the Economic Freedom Fighters. So that's a political party in South Africa. So just to kind of catch people up, South Africa, the apartheid government fell in the early 90s. Nelson Mandela became the president, and the after apartheid, you had a new government that emerged that was led by the African National Congress, and the ANC was largely dominated by the South African Communist Party. However, in the 1990s, the South African Communist Party started to kind of water down its beliefs. The Soviet Union had fallen and such. And, South Africa, very little, they are not a communist country. They're just, wealth has not been redistributed. Land has not been redistributed, and the black majority is still very poor. Most of the land is owned by the white majority. Even though Nelson Mandela, who, brought down apartheid, was somebody who was a communist, because even though the Soviet Union was the main funder of the anti-apartheid movement, things in South Africa, legal apartheid has been abolished, but property relations have largely not changed. Okay. And because of that, in recent years, especially since the economic crisis of 2008, there's been a lot of anger among working class South Africans and people that were in the ANC that actually believe in the communist ideology. And so there was a split from the African National Congress called the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF. And it started by Julius Malema. And Julius Malema is a very effective speaker, and he really plays up the communist angle, because the African National Congress, which is like a coalition, but it's like led by the South African Communist Party, because they really downplay, or have historically downplayed, their communist roots. EFF does the opposite. They play it up. And Julius Malema, he wears the red beret, and he has these big rallies where he preaches to big crowds, and he puts on these really exciting rallies. He's a very, very effective orator, and he's, an anti-imperialist politician who very much resents the white landowners, and very much, speaks for the black majority that is unsatisfied with the African National Congress and their reforms. Now, my position is that I feel that it would be better if all of the South African anti-imperialists were in one party. But obviously that can't be the case. And I don't think Julius Malema was wrong to break away from the ANC, but it's unfortunate that all the forces in South Africa, because unfortunately a lot of the people that dominate the ANC are reformists, are, pro-imperialist, whatever. But there's a lot of good people that are still in the African National Congress, because they see that as the party that represents the legacy of the struggle against apartheid. But at the same time, there's a number of legit anti-imperialists who've broken away to form the EFF. And I think there's good anti-colonial fighters in both parties. And I hope that South Africa will move in a direction of possibly having both parties once again merge, and have, all the forces in South Africa that are anti-imperialist in one party, and that party be fundamentally anti-imperialist. That's where I'm at. I will say this. Donald Trump has been talking about how in South Africa they are starting to redistribute some of the land of white farmers. And Donald Trump is angry about that. He's calling that persecution, etc. Well, I'm sorry, but apartheid, colonialism, redistributing the land, the farmland of South Africa, is something that I think is fundamentally, it's something the ANC should have done a long time ago. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if Donald Trump ends up putting sanctions on South Africa, that actually might have, in the long run, I'm not for it. I think sanctions are a form of economic warfare. No country should be subjected to sanctions. But if Trump does that, the result will probably be pushing South Africa closer to China and Russia, which are already very close to them. So it may actually, in the long term, play out in a way that benefits anti-imperialism, because, part of the reason that South Africa has not moved toward, creating a full socialist economy is because there's so much American investment and so much British and French investment in South Africa. So if you put sanctions on South Africa and make it hard for them to get that investment, they're going to get economically closer to Russia and China. And so that would incentivize them to become more of a socialist society. So, if Donald Trump's goal is to prevent the redistribution of white farmers' land in South Africa, isolating and getting the USA out of South Africa's economy is probably going to have the opposite effect in the long term. I think Donald Trump is doing what he's doing around South Africa more to demonstrate to his supporters, because Elon Musk is from South Africa and is a white farmer from South Africa, who's a bit racist, and that a lot of Donald Trump's supporters do very much have this idea that white people are persecuted. Whites are persecuted around the world. They sympathize with the white farmers of South Africa. So this is Donald Trump making a political statement, right? He's saying, oh, I don't approve of that South African government taking land from the white farmers. That's what he's doing. shows Donald Trump is, they're equating the economic freedom fighters. They're equating them with woke people, and it's Donald Trump playing for the base. But honestly, if Donald Trump was smart and if he really wanted to prevent the redistribution of land in South Africa, what he should do is increase American investment, because it's the power of the American purse string that would ultimately be able to prevent that from happening. But the more the USA is locked out, and the more other Western countries that are friendly to the USA are locked out of South Africa's economy, the closer South Africa is going to be to Russia and China. So Trump's moves, if he ends up putting them into effect, could backfire, and probably will backfire. And most of Africa is pivoting toward Russia and China anyway. So it may not even really make a difference in the long term. But there you go. All right. Thoughts on the claim of Christian persecution in China? Well, first of all, China, it has an interesting history, because, China was never like a Christian country or a Muslim country, right? China had a variety of different practices that had Buddhism, and there was what they called Chinese religion, which was local customs, ancestor worship, different temple practices, Taoism, things like that. But there was kind of a mishmash of different religions in China prior to the Chinese Revolution. And Christianity was there, but it was new. And actually, about in like the 1870s, there was a big civil war in China, a peasant uprising led by a guy who claimed to be Jesus's younger brother. It was called the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, and the peasants of China revolted against the emperor, and there was a big civil war led by a guy who had kind of his own interpretation of Christianity. He said he was Jesus' younger brother, sent to usher in and create like a heavenly kingdom, on earth, and redistribute the land to the peasants who fought against the emperor. And the Taiping uprising had a really big impact on Mao. But the Chinese Revolution, even before the communists, was very anti-religious. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who's considered the father of modern China, who both the government on Taiwan and the Chinese Communist Party both claim him, right? Mao, we have that suit, that blue suit, we call it a Mao suit in America. In China, it's called a Sun Yat-sen suit. It's named after Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And Dr. Sun Yat-sen, his first act was that, when he was a young man, he went to a village. And in this village, the poor peasants were being humiliated because they would have to burn some of their crops before these statues, these idols. And Dr. Sun Yat-sen wanted China to be modern and scientific. And he thought that practice of humiliating the peasants by making them burn some of their crops before the statue was degrading. So he smashed the idols. And he said, we don't need this superstition. We don't need these practices. Dr. Sun Yat-sen was very anti-religious. I guess he eventually became a Roman Catholic, but he was very much opposed to traditional Chinese religious practices. He thought they were embarrassing or something like that. And then we know Mao Zedong was a communist atheist. And during the Cultural Revolution in China, there was very extreme persecution of all religious groups. Now, originally, when the Chinese communists came to power, they made a deal, basically, that they formed associations, right? So in the 1950s, in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party was victorious. And originally, the Chinese Communist Party, they made a deal. It was what they called a new democratic revolution rather than a socialist revolution. And for the first 10 years, they did not seize any property. They built huge state-run industries with the help of the Soviet Union, but they did not nationalize anything. They did redistribute land to the peasants, but they did not seize the property of business owners. There were millionaires in China up into the 50s. It wasn't until the 60s that they started really nationalizing and creating like a state-run, like Soviet-style economy. But in the 50s, during the new democratic revolution, they created the Chinese Christian Association, the Chinese Buddhist Association, the Chinese Muslim Association. And these were religious associations that would handle the relationship between the Chinese Communist Party and the religious communities. And in the early years, there was a big effort to accommodate, especially Roman Catholics. However, during the Cultural Revolution, it was the opposite. During the Cultural Revolution, the idea was to sweep away anything that was not communist, right? Now, what's interesting is that there's a lot of like distortions, even though we can all agree that religious people were very heavily persecuted in China during the 1960s and 70s. There's a lot of distortion. For example, Tibetan Buddhism, right, which is a form of the Buddhist religion that is widely practiced in Tibet, was it heavily suppressed? Yeah. Was it suppressed because it was Tibetan? No. All religion was suppressed. Catholics were suppressed. Other Buddhists in China were suppressed. Muslims were suppressed. There was a big crackdown on all religion in China. And the way it's told, if you watch Hollywood movies like 7 Years in Tibet, they make it sound like the Chinese Communist Party was, trying to wipe out this traditional Tibetan religion. They were trying to wipe out all religion. And that during the Cultural Revolution, basically, it was anyone who was seen as working against communism was persecuted. It was kind of like mob rule. And so, like, Catholic priests and nuns were forced to get married because the Chinese Communist Party wanted to increase the population. And Catholic priests and nuns have a vow of chastity. They can't get married. Well, they were forced to get married, or else that was considered working against the party, and they would go to jail for working against the party. And there were many things like that where, various religious communities were accused of preaching their religion or doing things that were against what the party was trying to promote. And so they would be persecuted during the Cultural Revolution. And some of these ancient temples in China, that had been around for, thousands of years, they were destroyed, and China lost a lot of its cultural heritage because these young mobs of young Red Guard communists wanted to show how revolutionary they were. So they destroyed ancient buildings, right? There was a lot of that. It was just, we're going to completely break with our past. We're going to make everything pure and in line with communism. In the 80s, the Chinese Communist Party changed its relationship with religion, and they apologized for a lot of their position on religion. What's interesting is, there's a group called the Falun Gong. They're this, really anti-religious or anti-communist group that is, a religious group. They run Epoch Times newspaper and stuff. They were like a renegade faction of the Chinese Communist Party because after the Cultural Revolution was over, suddenly, there was a lot of religious practices happening all over China. A lot of, traditional Chinese medicine, a lot of ancestor worship and stuff, and all these kind of traditions that were deeply embedded in the Chinese people that the party had really suppressed during the Cultural Revolution kind of came back to the surface, and everyone was doing them. And then the Chinese Communist Party basically announced, you're free to practice this, but we don't believe in it. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't believe in traditional Chinese medicine. The founder of the Falun Gong was a guy who quit the Chinese Communist Party when they announced they didn't believe in Chinese medicine. And he started his own religious movement. That's a form of Buddhism, that it was a breakaway, it was because they believe in traditional Chinese medicine. But there are Christians in China there are more people attending church on Sunday morning in China than in America. Because it's a bigger country. People are able to practice their religion openly in China. However, there are a number of religious groups in China that are considered to be, how do you put this? They are considered to be subversive, right? That, that their doctrine preaches that communism is evil, and, so they suppress them on that basis. It's interesting. One of these religious groups is called Eastern Lightning. Right. And they worship a woman who they believe is the second coming of Christ. And they were outlawed in China because there was an incident where they were proselytizing at a McDonald's, and a father wouldn't let his daughter take one of their pamphlets. And there was an argument, and they killed someone. Right. And Eastern Lightning is largely considered to be a subversive group that's trying to overthrow the Chinese government. So their leaders live in New York City, and it's now based in New York City. Eastern Lightning, they're called, and they're just an anti-communist religious sect. That is, I guess they're Christian. They're, from the Christian tradition, probably mixing a lot of Chinese traditions in with it, and they are outlawed in China because they are considered to be against the government. There are Catholics, the Catholic Church in China. So for a long time, this is interesting. The Catholic Church in China, there was the Communist Party approved Catholic Church, and then there was the underground Catholic Church, and the Vatican recognized the underground church and did not recognize the official Communist Party approved Catholic Church. Well, Pope Francis changed that. So now the official Chinese Communist Party recognized Catholic Church is recognized by the Vatican. And the Vatican and the Chinese Communist Party are friendly to each other now. And the Chinese government is friendly with the Vatican. And that is certainly a step forward. And that's a big change. Also, in the Uyghur regions, right, where they're Muslim, there's a big problem with a lot of the Muslims in the Uyghur regions are anti-communist. So what the Chinese Communist Party now does is they build mosques and they build monasteries where they preach a message that is against opposing the Chinese government, that is against opposing communism. And they do the same thing in the Tibetan Buddhist regions. They're funding and building Tibetan monasteries, but they preach a Tibetan Buddhism that is not against the party. So that's the situation there. You know, there are a lot of Christians in China who practice their faith, and there are a lot of Christian groups in China that are considered to be against the Chinese Communist Party. It's more complicated, right? It's much more complicated. Nothing is ever simple, right? Nothing is ever simple. And in China, there are a lot of Christian groups that operate very openly, and there are some Christian groups that are illegal and forced underground, and that's largely based on, are they trying to stir up unrest and oppose the party, or are they just trying to practice their faith? And there's been adjustments in how that works. And everyone in China agrees that what they did during the Cultural Revolution was a disaster and that all kinds of people were suppressed, and that was very, very wrong. Yeah, I don't know what more there is to say about it. Glad for growth. We want to stay stuck in 2016. Calling Trump a Nazi fascist, that's so old. Glad CPI exists. Yeah, we're doing something new, right? I don't want people to think I'm a communist, because communists are on the wrong side. They're either on the wrong side, or there's a very small minority of them that think like us and are just fooling around on the internet and accomplishing nothing. And I want to be neither of those. So I'm building a new movement called Innovationism that takes the good from communism and leaves the bad. And largely, American communists take the bad and leave the good. That's a good way that Gavin put it. And that's the situation we're in. And the fact that I do want to emphasize, the fact that our political critics, you know, who harass us and say awful things about me and all that, they don't even realize that it was important to stand with Uhuru. They don't even realize that it was important to stand with, to stand with North Korea and do the peace mog outreach. That shows you how worthless they are. It doesn't even occur to them that you could build a movement, right? That right there tells you that it's like we're just doing something different than they're doing. We're playing. They're selling apples. We're selling oranges. It's just something fundamentally different, and that's why we need to exist, because we're doing something that is completely different. It's completely different, and just let them be behind. They don't know what they're doing, and like it doesn't occur to them that what we're doing has any value. Well, that's fine. Then don't do it, and we'll do it without you. We see a need. This organization needs to exist to do what it does, and we're going to keep doing it. And if they want to come do it with us, they're always welcome, right? But we're not trying to own communism, because communism as a brand, as a movement, is lost. We're trying to build the anti-imperialist movement this country fundamentally needs. So on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music, and we will be done. It's been fun, folks. Thanks for joining me for this late night live stream last minute. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.